I spot the bank transfer screenshot on my best friend Xiaoyu's phone. Mother-in-law sent her 30,000 yuan wedding deposit, while I've received zero funds, and all our pre-wedding written agreement stated equal 10,000 for both daughters-in-law. My entire marriage foundation cracks open in that single second. We grew up side by side since primary school, Xiaoyu and I. We got engaged on the exact same day to two brothers from the same family, a plan we'd mapped out together for years, thinking we'd build matching, peaceful little families next door to each other. The three sets of parents sat around the negotiation table months prior to lockdown, all wedding terms, every clause written out plain and clear for no room for argument. Local custom demanded an 1,800,000 bridal settlement fund, but since their household carried two sons' wedding costs, my mom and Xiaoyu's dad both softened the ask, agreeing to a flat 10,000 each for us girls. Critical verbal add-on. That money would be fully returned to our separate marital savings accounts as startup capital for our own small homes. No family meddling allowed. Mother-in-law Ali had promised right there in front of everyone she'd transfer the cash privately after the engagement banquet, skip public cash display to avoid theft risks. All of us bought into her seemingly thoughtful concern back then. I left the banquet venue that afternoon after hugging my fiancé goodbye for his business trip, completely unaware there'd be any disparity between Xiaoyu's treatment and mine. I'd gone back to my apartment to sort wedding paperwork when Xiaoyu hit my call, voice tight with quiet confusion, holding up her banking app screenshot to video chat. Look at this transfer slip she sent me an hour ago. She held her phone screen up to the camera, digits bold and unmissable, 300,000 renminbi fully credited to her personal card. We all agreed 10,000 flat rate for both of us, right? Why'd she send me triple the amount? Did she say anything to you about your deposit yet? My throat went dry instantly, fingers fumbling to unlock my own banking application, scrolling through every incoming transfer log from the past 48 hours. Zero matching remittance, not a single cent deposited under mother-in-law's name. I'd reread our family written agreement a dozen times to confirm there were no hidden exceptions, no fine print that adjusted the payment based on family wealth background. Xiaoyu's family ran a steady manufacturing enterprise with multi-million assets. My dad's construction firm had collapsed after partner fraud years prior, leaving my mom running a tiny retail shop to scrape by, but the contract had explicitly ruled out wealth-based discrimination for the bridal fund. Nothing's hit my account at all, I told her flat, no tremor in my tone, shock already hardening into cold clarity. She hasn't texted, called, or dropped a single line about when she'd send mine over either. Xiaoyu's brows knit tight, genuine worry etched across her features. You want me to drive over with you to her place to ask together? She can't pull this kind of obvious favoritism right after the engagement's only wrapped up a few hours. I shook my head, told her I'd place a polite call first to avoid blowing up the conflict publicly before we had solid proof of her double standard. I dialed Lee's cell number right then, her tone sharp and irritable the second the line connected, zero trace of the warm, welcoming woman she'd acted like at the banquet table earlier that day. Where have you run off to after the party ended? The whole house is covered empty drink cups, cigarette butts, leftover food trays. Get back over here immediately to deep clean the space. I kept my voice steady, refusing to let her shift blame onto me for housework before addressing the core financial issue. I'm calling regarding the 10,000 bridal deposit we settled on together at the family meeting. You transferred Xiaoyu's funds already, but mine hasn't arrived yet. A shrill burst of static crackled through the phone speaker before she snapped back at me, volume spiking with defensive rage. You're with Xiaoyu right now, aren't you? The two of you gossiping about me behind my back. I just asked her to show me her transfer record. That's how I found out there's a discrepancy. Get back to this residence this instant. We'll hash this whole money mess out face to face. I'm not sorting this out over a phone line. She cut the call mid-sentence without waiting for my reply, leaving me staring at the blank dial screen, every naive assumption I'd held about fair treatment crumbling piece by piece. Xiaoyu grabbed her car keys 10 minutes later to drive me to the mother-in-law's suburban home, both of us ready to lay the written family contract on her coffee table and demand an explanation for the unforgivable, unequal payout. When I pushed the front gate open, the living room's chaotic state hit me first, trash strewn across every flat surface, unwashed dishes stacked waist-high on the dining counter, sticky beverage residue coating the glass tabletop. Lee didn't even bother standing up to greet us, merely nodded toward a free chair by the sofa as if my presence was a nuisance interrupting her rest. I came to collect the agreed bridal deposit payment. I sat down straight, no idle small talk to soften the tension between us. Lee crossed her arms over her chest, scoffing loud enough to echo through the empty hall. You marched straight in here fixated on cash instead of lifting a finger to tidy this mess after our banquet guests left. How can you be so materialistic and shallow? All you care about is grabbing money off our family before you've even officially married my son. I held my ground, no outburst, only factual counterpoint to dismantle her manufactured moral high ground. We set the 10,000 figure jointly, with all parents present. It's not an unreasonable ask. You finished transferring 30,000 to Qiao right after the ceremony. There's no logical reason mine would be delayed indefinitely. Her expression shifted fast from irritation to fake placating softness, attempting to lull me into backing down with empty compromise lines. Help me scrub every surface of this living space for 2 hours, and once all cleanup's wrapped up, I'll sort out your deposit card for you, I promise. I weighed my options internally, mapping out every motive driving her manipulative behavior. 1. She viewed my family's modest income as justification to shortchange our agreed financial terms, assuming I'd be too meek to fight back against an elder's demands. 2. She used household labor as leverage to wear me down, hoping I'd drop the money inquiry entirely to avoid more exhausting domestic chores. 3. Her obsession with currying favor with Xiao Yu's wealthy family blinded her to the binding written agreement we'd all signed months prior. Emotionally, I'd clung to a tiny sliver of hope she'd treat me equally, even knowing she'd always preferred Xiao's privileged background. This exchange stripped that last faint optimism clean away, leaving only cold resolve to stop letting her walk all over me. I stood and grabbed a dish towel off the counter without arguing further, set to complete the full cleaning task she dangled as bargaining chip, all while quietly recording every word she spoke on my hidden cell voice memo tucked inside my jacket pocket, building a complete archive of her contradictory statements for future leverage. 2 full hours passed scrubbing floors, wiping tables, hauling trash bags out to the curb, every minute of labor wasted on a house she'd refused to maintain herself after hosting a party she'd profited from social status. I finished the final stack of plate washing and turned back toward her seated figure on the sofa, ready to restate my demand for the deposit card at last. Lee poured a warm glass of tap water and slid it toward me, leaning in with a secretive, conspiratorial tone, index finger pressed to her lips in a shushing gesture. I took both your 100,000 payments down to the bank the day before the banquet, had the teller lock them into multi-year fixed deposit accounts for maximum annual interest yield. The locked funds will mature years from now, net you extra profit over Chiao's freely transferable 300,000, so ultimately you'll walk away with more total cash than she gets. Keep this between us. Don't mention the fixed deposit plan to Chiao Yu. No need to stir unnecessary jealousy between you two girls. My eyes narrowed as I processed her transparent lie, recalling the 300,000 instant transfer slip Chiao had shown me only hours earlier. If both sums had been locked into long-term fixed savings, there would be no way Chiao had received liquid funds to her checking account that same afternoon. I called her bluff calmly, no raised voice, letting the recording device capture every word of her fabricated excuse. If both deposits were locked into fixed accounts, how did Chiao receive 300,000 instant transfer to her card yesterday? Lee's fake gentle smile dropped instantly, jaw tightening with suppressed anger, the mask of thoughtful elder care fully discarded to reveal her true biased malice. What's with your fixation on comparing every single thing to Chiao Yu? She's raised in a wealthy household with polished manners, while your family struggles to make ends meet. You ought to show some humility instead of hounding me for money nonstop. Our joint written contract set identical payment terms regardless of our parents' financial standing, I reminded her, sliding a folded copy of the signed agreement out of my crossbody bag onto the coffee table between us. That document was witnessed by 3 neutral relatives from both sides. It's legally binding for our wedding financial arrangements. She shot up from the sofa, towering over my seated frame, eyes blazing with unmasked disdain. You fixate on cash every time we speak. You're so petty and money-obsessed, it's embarrassing. Xiao, you never once badgered me about transfer timelines. She's far more graceful than you'll ever be. I've held off retrieving your fixed deposit card because of your endless complaining. Come back another day when you're less irritable, and I'll dig it out of my safe for you. The mid-chapter critical reversal hits hard here. I'd only come prepared to ask for the delayed deposit, fully believing her fixed deposit lie for the first 30 minutes of our conversation, until I cross-referenced her story against Chao's real-time bank slip and realized every word out of her mouth was premeditated deception to stall and belittle me for my family's lower income bracket. I fold the contract back up, grip tight on my hidden recorder, and pivot toward the front door without another word to her, knowing I can't resolve this conflict with passive requests. Solid, irrefutable physical evidence will be required to force her to honor our pre-negotiated terms. As I step out onto the front walkway, I text Xiaoyu to meet me at the downtown bank branch first thing tomorrow morning to cross-check account records, fully anticipating we will tamper with paperwork or invent another layer of lies to cover up her 300,000 favoritism toward Xiaoyu. I realize this isn't a simple delayed payment issue. It's a calculated power play meant to remind me I'm viewed as the inferior daughter-in-law from the moment we step foot under the same family roof, and I won't let her get away with exploiting that bias unchallenged any longer. Bank staff confirmed the deposit card Lee handed me holds 0 account activity. No fixed deposit, no 100,000 principal locked away. Every word of her fixed savings story was a complete fabrication, a deliberate ploy to stall me indefinitely. Xiaoyu arrived at my apartment complex at 8 a.m. Sharp the next morning, her expression hard the second she spotted my grim face, already furious on my behalf before I even recounted Lee's previous day lies and excuses. I'm coming with you back to her place to confront her head-on. No more one-sided conversations where she twists every argument to make you look unreasonable. I didn't push back on her offer, knowing having a neutral witness with Chiao's financial background would strip Lee of her ability to spread one-sided gossip about my supposed greed to the rest of the family later on. We pulled up to the mother-in-law's residence 10 minutes later, and the second Lee pulled the front door open, her entire facial demeanor shifted overnight. Where she'd snapped and sneered at me alone the prior evening, she lit up with warm, overly saccharine delight the moment Xiaoyu stepped onto the porch, completely ignoring my presence trailing behind her best friend. Xiaoyu, you're such a rare delight to drop by unannounced. She grabbed Xiao's wrist to tug her inside the living room. Not a single glance cast my direction for a full 30 seconds, as if I was invisible standing right behind them on the entry mat. Xiao gently pulled her arm free of Lee's grasp, tone calm but unyielding, cutting straight past the performative friendliness to address the core financial fraud. We came together today to settle the bridal deposit discrepancy once and for all, for the contract we all signed months ago. Lee's grin faded instantly, flicking a sharp glare my way before turning back to Chiao with soft, manipulative whispers, pitched just loud enough for me to hear every syllable. Don't let her fill your head with petty grievances. She's bitter about her family's lack of wealth, so she fixates on every small difference between our treatment of you two to manufacture drama. You're far too kind to let her drag you into her money-driven tantrums. I stepped forward, cutting off her attempt to poison Xiao's perspective against me, voice steady with 0 emotional outburst. The written contract mandated identical 100,000 deposits for both of us. You transferred 300,000 liquid funds to Chiao immediately post-engagement, yet gave me a vague fixed deposit lie with 0 proof to back it up. Hand over the deposit card you claimed held my locked principal, and we'll verify its balance at the bank together right now. Lee huffed in exaggerated irritation, stomping into her bedroom safe to retrieve a plain plastic bank card, tossing it roughly into my outstretched palm like she was handing over worthless trash rather than agreed marital startup capital. There's your card. Stop badgering me nonstop over trivial funds. Go check it if you're so distrustful of my word. Don't waste my precious time. I gripped the card tight, Chow and I driving straight to the city's main bank branch within minutes, our nerves taut with anticipation and quiet dread. I inserted the plastic card into the self-service ATM machine, typed in the generic PIN I provided, and waited for the screen to load my account balance. The 2-digit zero flashed bold across the monitor. No hidden fixed deposit subaccounts. No historical incoming transfers matching the 10,000 figure. Not a single dollar of bridal settlement ever deposited under that card number. I reinserted the card 3 separate times on different bank terminals to rule out machine error. Each readout identical. Completely empty. A useless blank piece of plastic sheet fabricated as a distraction to brush me off. This mid-chapter pivotal reversal rewrites every assumption I'd held about Lee's character up to this point. I'd initially believed she'd merely delayed transferring the funds and hidden them in a long-term savings account to earn extra interest, a selfish but semi-reasonable financial choice. Now I learned there were never any locked funds at all. Her entire fixed deposit narrative was a fully constructed lie meant to stall me until I backed down from pursuing the agreed payment entirely, all while openly gifting triple the contracted amount to Chiao out of blatant wealth favoritism. My internal emotional shift hits hard. Lingering tiny traces of willingness to compromise vanished completely, replaced by cold, unshakable resolve to collect full legal evidence of her fraud and bias before confronting her again. Xiao's hands tightened around her phone, ready to dial Lee's number and blast her over the empty account lie, but I held her wrist back to pause the call long enough to consult bank customer support for official account history printouts. The lead teller pulled up the card's full 2-year transaction log, handing us a stamped paper report with 0 incoming deposits, no fixed deposit linkage, no recurring interest payments of any kind documented on the account's ledger. We folded the official bank receipt into my evidence folder alongside the signed family contract and my hidden voice recording of Lee's prior deceptive excuses, then drove back to her residence with irrefutable paper proof in hand. Lee didn't even bother glancing at the bank statement. I laid flat on her coffee table, crossing her arms and leaning back against the sofa with a haughty, unconcerned sneer the second we walked through the door. So the card shows a 0 balance. What's your point? I deposited the 10,000 principal into this account weeks ago. It's not my fault if you snuck in to withdraw every cent without telling anyone. The manufactured accusation hung thick in the air, a transparent attempt to flip blame onto me for stealing non-existent funds from a blank account she'd handed over minutes earlier. She doubled down on her slander before I could interject, turning to Chiao with performative pity in her tone. You ought to distance yourself from this girl, Xiaoyu. She's willing to invent wild conspiracy theories about me just to squeeze extra cash out of our family. She'll drag you into pointless conflict if you keep associating with her. I held up the stamped bank transaction ledger between us, tapping the printed 0 balance line with my index finger, factual and unflappable. The bank's official record proves this card has never received a single 10,000 deposit transfer. There's no record of any withdrawal activity from this account either, so your claim that I stole the funds is fully fabricated slander with 0 supporting evidence. Lee's temper snapped fully at my unarguable proof, raising her voice loud enough to carry through every wall of a suburban home, drawing the attention of neighbors passing by the front yard fence. Your whole family survives hand-to-mouth off tiny retail profits. Of course you're desperate to squeeze extra money out of my son's wedding fund. If you'd possess the dignity Xiaoyu carries, you'd accept whatever I deign to give you without throwing public fits over minor payment delays. I glanced over at Xiao, who'd remained silent observing Lee's unhinged outburst up until this point, then stepped forward to address the mother-in-law directly, laying out my core motives clearly to anchor every action I'd taken over the past 48 hours. 1. My only objective was enforcing a mutually signed, witnessed financial agreement, not demanding handouts or additional unplanned cash. 2. I'd exhausted all polite, private avenues of inquiry first before bringing Xiao as a neutral witness, only resorting to bank records once Lee's lies stacked too high to ignore. 3. Every step I'd taken stemmed from a desire to establish equal treatment before marriage, not create petty drama to humiliate her publicly. My internal emotional state solidifies further as I watch her refuse to acknowledge the stamped bank paperwork laid out in front of her. She has 0 intention of honoring our pre-wedding deal and will invent any lie, accusation, or slander to avoid paying the agreed bridal deposit. Xiao cut through Lee's shouting mid-rant, voice sharp and unwavering to break through her defensive rage. You handed me 100,000 liquid funds the day after the engagement banquet, fully complying with our contract for my payout, yet refused to fulfill the identical terms for her. That's not a minor delay. That's intentional, unequal favoritism bordering on financial deception, and you can't keep making false theft accusations to deflect from your broken promise. Lee's face flushed bright red with embarrassment and unbridled fury, jumping up from the sofa to grab my arm hard, attempting to drag me toward the front door and kick us both off her property to avoid facing the irrefutable bank evidence laid out on her coffee table. I pulled my arm free of her bruising grip, stepping back alongside Xiao. The full stack of evidence documents clutched tight in my bag as I turned to walk out the front gate, fully prepared to escalate this conflict to both my fiancé and the neutral family witnesses who'd signed our contract months prior if she refused to settle within 24 hours. As we climb into Xiao's sedan, my fiancé's text pops up on my phone screen. He's finished his cross-city business trip early and will be arriving back in town that evening, unaware of his mother's blatant financial fraud and manufactured slander against me. I realize Lee will twist the entire narrative to paint me as a greedy, unreasonable troublemaker the second he steps foot in the house, and I now hold complete, official paper evidence to counter every single one of her fabricated accusations when he hears both sides of the full story tonight. We drove away from Lee's house, the stamped bank ledger and hidden audio recordings safely stored in my handbag. Xiao's knuckles tightened around the steering wheel the whole drive back to my apartment, every few seconds glancing over at me with a mix of anger and pity. Can you believe she dared to claim you stole non-existent money? That woman's good at weaving lies out of thin air, and she's got zero intention of abiding by the written agreement we all signed together. I leaned back against the passenger seat headrest, staring blankly out the car window. Over the past 2 days, I tried every gentle way to resolve the issue alone. My motives were never about craving extra cash. I only wanted the equal treatment we'd all agreed on before committing to marry into this family. I'd endured 2 hours of backbreaking housework at her request, patiently listened to all her made-up fixed deposit excuses, and only brought Xiao along as a neutral witness after I had zero proof to counter her deception. Every small compromise I offered only made Lee bolder in her bias and slander, and that slow process of realizing she would never treat me fairly had chipped away every last bit of softness I'd held for her. All that remained now was cold, clear disappointment. I'll wait for my fiancé to get back tonight, show him every piece of evidence we've collected. If he's reasonable, he'll make his mother transfer the 100,000 yuan immediately. If he takes her side, there's nothing left to talk about. Xiao reached over and squeezed my palm gently. Whatever choice you make, I'm with you. If you walk away from this engagement, I won't stay in this family either. I only agreed to date his elder brother because we plan to live close as best friends, but their household's twisted double standards aren't worth sticking around for. That evening, my fiancé arrived at my apartment right after finishing his business trip. He dropped his travel suitcase by the door and sat down on my sofa, looking exhausted from weeks of cross-city work. I didn't waste any time beating around the bush, spreading the signed family agreement, bank transaction printouts, and my voice recording phone on the coffee table one by one for him to examine thoroughly. I laid out every event in chronological order, without emotional exaggeration. The equal 100,000 yuan rule agreed by all parents, Xiao's instant 300,000 transfer, Lee's empty deposit card, the bank's zero balance certificate, and all the slanderous words Lee had said about my family's poor financial status. I played the audio clip where she'd called me money hungry and accused me of stealing the non-existent deposit funds, letting him hear every unfiltered word from his mother's own mouth. I'd fully expected him to feel shocked and apologetic on my behalf, to immediately call his mother and force her to honor the contract we'd signed together. This is the devastating mid-story reversal that shattered every remaining expectation I had for our relationship. After flipping through the papers for a few minutes, he set them down casually, his tone flat and dismissive, no trace of sympathy for the unfair treatment I'd endured. My mom's not entirely in the wrong here. Xiao's family owns a manufacturing factory with millions in assets. Her parents can afford to splurge on her. Your mom only runs a tiny shop. Your dowry will be minimal at best point. 100,000 is already far more than you deserve given your family's circumstances. I froze, every muscle in my body going rigid. All the time we'd spent planning our future, all the late night talks about fairness and mutual respect suddenly felt like empty, meaningless noise. I'd spent years dating him, trusted his word when he said his family would treat me with dignity, and now he repeated his mother's exact biased logic back to my face without a single second of hesitation. The contract was signed by 3 sets of parents together. We all agreed on equal bridal money regardless of family wealth. I reminded him, my voice tight with suppressed rage. Lee gave Xiao 3 times the agreed amount immediately, handed me a blank worthless card, and publicly belittled me for being from a low-income household. You think this is acceptable? He shrugged like my pain was a trivial nuisance, then brought up a new demand that made my blood run cold. Even if she finally transfers the 100,000 to you, the money's meant for our shared household anyway. Don't deposit it solely in your personal account. Hand it over to me, and I'll use it to trade in my old sedan for a newer, larger vehicle for us to drive around together. Also, tell your mother to prepare a hefty dowry to match this bridal fund. A bitter, hollow laugh escaped my lips. All this time, Lee's manipulation hadn't only been her own doing. Her son shared the exact selfish mindset, viewing my bridal settlement as his personal disposable cash, not the startup capital for our joint life we'd agreed on months prior. Every sacrifice I'd planned to make for this marriage felt completely pointless now. I'd envisioned a partnership where we split responsibilities and treated each other's families fairly. Instead, both mother and son saw me as someone they could shortchange and exploit for their own benefit. I won't hand that money over to you for a car, even if Lee finally sends it to me. It's my separate marital startup fund, as written in the contract. His expression darkened instantly, frustration thickening in his voice. Why do you have to be so stubborn? All other girls around here happily hand their bridal money to their fiancés to buy vehicles or houses. You're just being difficult for no reason, picking fights with my mom over trivial cash amounts right after our engagement. He completely ignored the stack of irrefutable evidence laid out between us, choosing to label me the unreasonable troublemaker instead of holding his mother accountable for breaking a formal family agreement. There was no point trying to reason with him any longer. I'd watched him side with the person who'd lied, slandered, and cheated me out of our agreed funds without a single flicker of remorse, and in that moment, all the love I'd held for him drained away entirely. My emotional shift was permanent. I no longer cared about fixing this engagement or getting even the 100,000 yuan back. All I wanted was to cut every tie with this biased, ungrateful family for good. I stood up from the sofa and folded all the evidence documents back into my bag, zipping it shut tight. This wedding is off. We're done. He stared at me like I just said something ridiculous, laughing off my words as a temporary angry tantrum. You're just mad for a couple days over a little money dispute. You don't mean that. Calm down, sleep on it, and tomorrow we'll talk this through again. I mean every word. I replied flat, no room for negotiation in my tone. Your mother broke the formal contract we all signed. You fully agree with her unfair double standards, and you view my bridal money as your personal spending cash. There's no foundation left for us to build a marriage on. I grabbed my keys and walked straight out of the apartment without looking back, leaving him sitting alone on the sofa staring at the scattered paperwork. I called Xiao the second I stepped onto the street, told her every word my fiancé had said, every selfish demand he'd thrown at me regarding the bridal funds. Xiao's response came without a single moment of hesitation. If you're not marrying into this family, I won't either. I only agreed to date his brother because we plan to live close as best friends, but their whole household is rotten to the core. Mother and sons all think they can take advantage of girls with smaller family assets. That night, I transferred the 100,000 yuan Li had reluctantly sent to my bank account straight back to her card, taking a screenshot of the successful refund and sending it to both my fiancé and Li alongside a short message confirming the engagement cancellation. Minutes later, my phone blew up with dozens of furious 60-second voice messages from Li, all filled with vicious insults calling me greedy and ungrateful, claiming I had wasted their family's time by agreeing to the engagement only to backtrack over money. I forwarded all the voice message screenshots to Xiao, fully planning to gather more evidence and completely dismantle their family's scheme to exploit women from less wealthy backgrounds. I sent the full 100,000 transfer back to Li's bank account before midnight, attached a short text clearly stating the engagement was permanently terminated, then muted her contact to avoid the endless stream of raging voice notes blowing up my phone. The next morning, I hadn't even finished breakfast when Xiao rushed over to my apartment, clutching multiple screenshots from the neighborhood WeChat group and dozens of witness texts from mutual relatives. She dropped her phone onto my dining table, so I could read every fabricated lie Li had been circulating overnight. Li's posts painted a wildly distorted version of the whole incident to every neighbor and distant family member. She claimed I deliberately tricked their household into paying bridal money, threw a fit over trivial wealth gaps after receiving the funds, and unilaterally called off the wedding just to extort compensation from her son. Her elder son, Xiao's fiancé, joined in the smear campaign, posting long paragraphs accusing Xiao of manipulating their family's property and savings, saying my best friend had maliciously encouraged me to abandon the marriage as a scheme to ruin their household's reputation. I sat frozen on the dining stool, scrolling through endless comments from gullible onlookers who'd bought their one-sided narrative hook, line, and sinker. No one bothered to reach out to me to hear my side of the story before passing judgment. Every person in the community labeled me a gold-digging schemer, all because Leah controlled the public narrative without a single piece of counter-evidence being shared yet. My inner emotional shift was sharp and clear. I'd initially only wanted to walk away quietly and cut all ties, but their deliberate, widespread character assassination erased any trace of mercy I'd held toward them. If they intended to destroy my reputation to cover up their own fraud and favoritism, I had every right to fight back with irrefutable proof of their hypocrisy. Xiao noticed my tight, trembling grip on the phone and placed a hand on my arm to calm me down, laying out every witness account she'd quietly collected overnight. She'd chatted with over a dozen elderly neighbors and distant kin who'd overheard Li bragging about giving her 100,000 yuan right after the engagement, as well as overhear Li badmouthing my family's modest income on multiple occasions. Every conversation was saved as time-stamped text records and voice memos, stored in an encrypted cloud folder separate from her personal phone storage. This was the mid-story critical plot twist I hadn't anticipated. I'd planned to only rely on bank slips and the signed contract as evidence, but Xiao's proactive witness gathering gave us mountains of additional verbal proof of Li's premeditated bias and slander. All of these people heard her admit she treated us unequally long before we ever fought over the deposit card. Xiao tapped the screen to pull up a recorded audio clip of an aunt's testimony. They're willing to step forward as witnesses if we need to present everything to the community or civil mediation staff. The family thought they could ruin us by spreading rumors, but they accidentally left dozens of people who can contradict every lie they told. I nodded slowly, sorting through our full stack of evidence laid across the table. The jointly signed wedding financial agreement, stamped zero-balance bank receipts, hours of hidden voice recordings of Li's threats and favoritism, witness statements from neighborhood onlookers, screenshots of their public slander posts, and the full refund transfer record proving I never kept a cent of their bridal money. Every piece lined up to expose their complete hypocrisy, but Xiao shook her head when I suggested simply posting all proof in the neighborhood group to clear our names. Just releasing the evidence to fight gossip won't make them truly pay for how they've treated us, she said, her tone calm and calculated, laying out the full layered plan she'd mapped out overnight while gathering witness testimony. Her motives were fully transparent to me as she explained each step. Core motive: the mother and two sons valued wealth and social prestige above everything. Li dreamed of owning a luxury villa to show off to neighbors. The elder son coveted Xiao's family business assets. The younger son saw my bridal fund as free disposable income for a new car. Their greed was their biggest vulnerability we could exploit legally, without us committing any malicious acts. Step-by-step execution process. First, we let Li's obsession with a high-end villa spiral out of control. Xiao would casually feed her tempting property information, hinting her father would cover 2 million renovation fees if the villa was purchased for their marriage, but omit the condition that the funds only applied if Xiao owned a portion of the home. Once Li was desperate to raise the down payment, we planned a legitimate legal channel for small-sum private lending, no illegal usury, only registered licensed lending institutions, to push her into signing high-debt contracts. Emotional impact expectation. We wouldn't lie or forge anything. We'd merely let their own insatiable greed drive them into financial ruin. Every debt they took on would be their voluntary choice, a natural consequence of their endless desire to flaunt wealth they couldn't afford. We wouldn't manipulate them into anything. We'd only remove the barriers holding their greed back. I listened closely, weighing every risk of her plan. We would not fabricate documents, threaten anyone, or engage in illegal activity of any kind. Every word we spoke to Li about the villa and renovation funds would hold a kernel of truth, leaving the final financial decisions entirely up to their family's own free will. All damage they suffered would be self-inflicted, a reckoning for their years of biased exploitation and public slander against us. The plan was fully within legal boundaries and guaranteed to dismantle the family's core obsession with status and money that had fueled all their mistreatment of me and Xiao. 2 days later, we arrived at Lee's front door together. The living room was packed with her relatives and close neighborhood friends, all gathered at her invitation to listen to her rant about my supposed gold digger scheme. The second Lee spotted us crossing the threshold, she stood up and raised her voice for the whole room to hear, launching into another tirade of fabricated accusations about me abandoning the wedding for cash. Her elder son stood beside her, echoing every false claim, while the younger brother glowered at me with unmasked hatred. Xiao didn't rush to argue or yell back. She waited patiently for Lee to finish her whole speech before pulling out printed copies of a $300,000 transfer slip sent to her after the engagement, holding it up for every person in the room to see. Everyone here heard Aunt Lee say $100,000 would be the fixed bridal payment for both of us. This transfer record proves she broke that promise the very same day the banquet ended. A murmur rippled through the crowd of relatives, dozens of them exchanging shocked glances as they processed the hard paper proof they'd never been shown before. Lee's face paled instantly, rushing to dismiss the transfer slip as a meaningless gift unrelated to the agreed wedding fund, but Xiao immediately pulled out the stack of witness voice recordings and played them aloud. Multiple elderly neighbors' voices echoed through the room, each confirming Lee had openly bragged about giving Xiao triple the agreed money while planning to shortchange me. Lee grew frantic, trying to cut off the audio playback by snatching Xiao's phone out of her hand, but I stepped forward to block her path, placing the full refund bank receipt on the coffee table for everyone to view. I returned every cent she sent me. I never kept a single yuan of their bridal money, so all the rumors that I extorted their family are outright false slander. The room's collective opinion shifted completely in minutes. Many attendees turned to glare at Lee and her two sons, realizing they'd been fed a one-sided lie to smear my reputation for no valid reason. Lee lost control of her composure entirely, screaming that all our paperwork had been forged, yet she couldn't produce a single document to contradict our evidence stack. Before the crowd could disperse, Xiao dropped the villa bait casually into the conversation, exactly as we'd planned in advance. A new high-end housing complex just launched downtown with large single-family villas, 20,000 per square meter. My dad mentioned he'd allocate $2 million for home renovations if I move into a marital property matching my family's standard. She paused, glancing at Lee's instantly lit up, greedy expression before adding the deliberate omission. It's a shame the down payment requirement is so steep for most ordinary households. Lee's rage vanished in an instant, all her focus fixed solely on the prospect of a luxury villa and free renovation cash. She completely forgot about the slander argument, bombarding Xiao with dozens of rapid-fire questions about the housing project's location, pricing, and available unit layouts. Her two sons also leaned in eagerly, their minds already fixed on Xiao's family's wealth rather than the ongoing reputation dispute. We exchanged a subtle silent glance, knowing the first critical step of our counterplan had already taken perfect effect. As we turned to leave Lee's residence, I glanced back through the screen door and watched her immediately pick up her cell phone to call a real estate agent, rushing to schedule a viewing for the luxury villa complex Xiao had mentioned. Her two brothers huddled beside her, brainstorming ways to quickly scrape together the massive down payment required, blind to the financial trap their own greed was walking straight into. All their energy shifted from smearing our reputations to chasing unattainable luxury, and the rest of their self-destruction would unfold entirely by their own choices from this point forward. The second we stepped out of Lee's courtyard, Xiao's shoulder relaxed. She'd laid the bait perfectly. We didn't fabricate a single lie about the villa project or her father's renovation budget, only omitted the critical ownership condition that would break Lee's fantasy of using Xiao's family money for free luxury living. Our core motive wasn't to frame them. We only removed the restraint their fear of unaffordable debt had placed on their greed, letting their own obsession with social status lead them into irreversible trouble. I'd originally only wanted to clear my name and cut all contact, but their vicious village-wide slander forced me to defend myself by letting their flaws self-destruct them. 3 full days passed before we got wind of their actions from a neighborhood aunt who ran the local real estate agency. Lee had gone to view the villa complex twice with both sons, spending hours calculating every possible way to scrape together the massive down payment they couldn't afford with their combined salaries. Their small old apartment was the only fixed asset they owned, and the agency said its resale value would barely cover half the required upfront cost. Desperate to grab the villa before any other buyers snatched their preferred unit, Lee immediately signed papers to list the house for emergency quick sale at a steep loss, just to get cash faster. That afternoon, Xiao and I parked a short distance from the loan office downtown, hidden where we could watch without being spotted. We brought a hidden voice recorder per our pre-planned backup measure. Xiao's logic was straightforward. We needed proof they'd voluntarily sought high-interest loans of their own free will, so they couldn't later claim we manipulated or tricked them into borrowing money. This was the pivotal mid-story plot reversal I hadn't anticipated fully. I thought they'd hesitate and back off once they saw the interest rates, but Lee's vanity completely blinded her to risk. Through the glass storefront, we watched Lee lean over the lending counter, bargaining aggressively to push the maximum loan amount higher, her elder son nodding beside her while the younger one scribbled numbers on a scrap of paper, calculating how much villa furniture they could buy with extra borrowed cash. The loan officer clearly warned them about compound monthly interest and severe overdue penalty clauses, but Lee waved the warnings off like trivial nuisances. We've got Xiao's family renovation money coming to cover all repayments in a few months. No need to worry about falling behind on installments. Every word was captured crystal clear on our recording device. They never once mentioned us pressuring them into this decision. Their sole driving force was the desire to own a flashy villa to show off to every neighbor who'd heard them brag about marrying wealthy Xiao. They left the loan office clutching a thick stack of cash envelopes, grinning widely as they headed straight for the real estate sales center to lock in the villa unit. We stayed in the car reviewing the audio files afterward, cross-referencing every line they'd spoken. No coercion, no false promises from our side. All choices originated from their own hunger for status symbols. My emotional shift settled into quiet calm. I felt no sadistic glee watching them dig their own financial hole, only a cold sense of justified balance after everything they'd done to ruin my reputation and cheat me out of the agreed wedding settlement. The next morning, Lee and her 2 sons arrived at the villa sales office with a full combined cash from the house sale plus the private loan principal, ready to sign the purchase contract. Xiao timed our arrival perfectly, walking in right as the sales manager handed them the official property paperwork. Lee spotted us instantly, puffing out her chest with arrogant pride, gesturing at the villa floor plans spread across the desk to show off her new asset. Look at the layout we've secured. Soon we'll live in a villa matching your family standard. No more cramped old apartment for us. She fully expected Xiao to gush with admiration and immediately offer up the 2 million renovation funds she'd hinted at days prior. Xiao kept her tone soft and neutral, no hint of malice, just plain factual explanation that we'd held back earlier to watch their greed unfold. There's one detail I didn't get to finish mentioning the other day. My father's 2 million renovation subsidy has a strict legal condition. The funds are only dispersed if my name is added as joint co-owner on the villa property deed. If the house is solely registered under your family's names, the subsidy application will be rejected automatically by his finance team. The color drained entirely from Lee's face in a split second. All her prior elation melted into raw panic, her hands shaking as she gripped the villa purchase contract she'd just signed. She'd already sold their only residential property and locked herself into years of high-interest loan repayments under the assumption Xiao's family would cover all bills for free, with zero backup plan if the renovation money fell through. Her elder brother's jaw tightened, the younger son's shoulders slumping hard. They'd never factored a co-ownership clause into their reckless financial plan. Lee's temper flared instantly, voice rising loud enough to draw every sales staff's gaze. Why didn't you say this sooner? You knew we'd sell our house and take out loans to buy this place. Did you plan to trick us all along? Xiao tilted her head slightly, unfazed by her outburst, holding up the phone with our earlier conversations recording pulled up. I only told you my dad offers 2 million for villa renovations. I never lied or concealed anything malicious. You jumped to the conclusion you could claim the money without any ownership obligation entirely on your own. Every financial risk you've taken was your voluntary decision. No one forced you to sell your home or borrow high-interest capital. Lee's mind raced to concoct a new scheme, switching tactics in an instant to beg Xiao to waive the co-ownership rule, even offering to add her name after 1 year of repayments. When Xiao firmly refused any loopholes, the elder brother's patience snapped completely, stepping forward and raising a fist as if to threaten Xiao. I stepped between them without hesitation. I trained basic self-defense as a teen, and within 3 quick moves, I disarmed him and pushed him backward onto the reception sofa. Security guards rushed over at the commotion, separating all 4 of us before any physical harm landed. Lee screamed accusations that we'd set a trap to ruin their family, but every sales clerk and loan officer on site had witnessed the full sequence. Lee had volunteered to take loans, volunteered to sell the apartment, and only assumed free money without listening to full terms. Their own greed was the sole root of their crisis. The sales manager handed them a copy of the villa cancellation policy, spelling out that backing out now would forfeit 80% of their down payment as liquidated damages. They had no way to recoup most of the cash they'd poured in already. Lee and her 2 sons stormed out of the sales office, screaming threats at us, scrambling to the loan agency to beg for early contract termination, only to be told the penalty fees would cripple their monthly income even worse. They were trapped between a worthless canceled villa deposit and years of compound interest debt, with no family wealth buffer to fall back on. We left the sales center knowing their self-inflicted financial collapse was now inevitable, but we still held all audio and paper evidence of their voluntary choices, ready to defend ourselves if they tried to shift blame and file false police reports against us later.